Welcome back, everyone. We are ready to start the next session. We have essentially two topics we're going to discuss in the next session. One is the core resource type vocabulary, which will be explained to you in more detail by the experts. And the second topic is the International Repository Directory, which is a new directory that has been launched by COAR. Will be officially launched by COAR very soon. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Actually, I'll introduce the two speakers who will be speaking about the COAR vocabularies. Our first speaker is Isabel Bernal, and she is the manager of Open Science Services at a major national repository in Spain. She is also our new chair of the COAR Executive Board, so congratulations, Isabel. Yay. And Isabel has for I think, since the inception of the COAR vocabularies, has been the chair of the COAR vocabularies editorial board and working group. So she will be our first speaker, and our second speaker will be Gultekin Gurdal from Turkey. And he is the director of the Izmir University Library. And they have integrated the COAR resource type vocabulary, or even maybe some more vocabularies, into their repository. So he's going to show you how that works. But we'll start with Isabel. So the floor is yours, Isabel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. So, in fact, I think this is the oldest working group in COAR, because we started in 2014. So, yeah, it's a long way already. So, as you saw in the title, what I'm going to do is to give an overview of what we've been doing over the last 2 years. I hope you are aware that we have a new version of the resource type vocabulary, which was released in last December. So they are ready for you to integrate in your repository or in your open system. So I'm going to give you an overview of what we've done, what are the new concepts, a little bit about how the working group works, and also like a preview of things that we have in mind for the next months and year. And then I will pass the word to my colleague that will be going more technical into explaining the integration in the Turkish community. So I'm going to, for maybe people that don't know very much about the COAR vocabularies, we have 3 vocabularies, but in this presentation I'm only going to focus on one of them in the resource type vocabulary, but what I'm going to say here can also be applied as principles to the other ones. These are open access vocabularies in the sense that they are licensed with CC0, so they are ready to be reused in creative ways by all of you. And another thing that I think is really important today is that it has a transparent and community-driven governance behind, which is not something you can say or take for granted in all the services that are out there in this huge open science landscape. So this means that we are really a community of people, that we are all related and participating in COAR. All the decisions are taken in a very transparent way, and you know who are the people that are behind this. Also, from the technological point of view, we are using SCOS format. So we are talking about a hierarchical vocabulary. It has a classification that interrelates the different concepts. So we are not talking about a plain vocabulary of the old times, but a hierarchical, sophisticated one, which is also a compliance with the FAIR principles. I will show you how it is fair. Also, another important feature of the vocabularies is that they support multilingualism. I mean, COAR is a global community, so we have to make sure that they are ready to be used by everyone. So this means that all the concepts are available in as many languages as needed. So this is very nice, and I think is very special feature about this vocabulary. And then we are always, or try to be in sync with all the transformations in the open science landscape. For instance, with this vocabulary that is about resource types, we are always, keeping an eye on all the transformations. At the beginning, in the vocabulary, we were mostly focusing on publications, types of articles, types of publications, reports, and then little by little, we open up to other types of resource outputs that repositories and other open science infrastructures have. And in fact, this is also a very interesting feature in our latest version. Also for you to see, this is the look and feel of the vocabularies. This is the web page where you can find these three vocabularies. I will only be focusing today on the resource type, but you see it's very clean, it's very beautiful design, thanks to Antleaf. Very easy to use. And behind we have IQVoc, which is a tool that is widely used to build and to manage vocabularies. And here, again, the contribution of one member of COAR is essential. In fact, is the University of Vienna. So thank you, colleagues. You are here, and it would be impossible to manage also these vocabularies without your support in this regard. So here is an example of one of the concepts. This is one of the new concepts we have in this latest version of the vocabulary. And when I say the vocabularies are fair, it's because we are not just reaching consensus on the concepts that we are going to include in the classification and just create a plain list, but we are assigning a persistent identifier to every single concept, so they can be interoperable and accessible by machines. We also put and reach a consensus for a definition for every single concept. So this could be like for the human consumption, so that everybody understands that in this case archival collection means something very specific, and this is important, that everybody is understanding the same thing for this concept. And then also we create this hierarchical structure. In the first place, for every language that is represented in the vocabulary, we put the concept in all the languages that are participating, which is the main label for the concept, but we also the SCOS format allows to include alternate labels in all these languages. Why this is important? Because in some languages, for referring to the same concept, you may have different words. Or in some languages, depending on regional differences, one word is preferred over others. So we encapsulate all of them in the vocabulary, and then the users, the repository, can decide to choose the label that is more widely used in their community. And also, we relate every single concept of the vocabulary with the broader concept within the vocabulary. So this is kind of establishing a very nice structure and hierarchy. In this case, we have the archival collection is falling under collections. So you see that logically, this is all very well organized. And last but not the least, we also do all this work to relate the concepts of the vocabulary with concepts that are similar or related in third-party vocabularies, trying to reflect the whole landscape. You know that now with open science, creating and maintaining vocabularies, ontologies, is all the rage, because it's an essential pillar to make all these outputs findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So in 2021, we released version 3 of the vocabulary. We focus mostly on concepts that are under research data typology, and we were also working on other things related to industrial, commercial exploitation, like patents and all these things. And in 2021, we reached 93 concepts in total, the vocabulary. Over these last 2 years, we've been working towards 3.2, which is the one that I'm going to present. But something in between happened that I think is also very important. As I said, this working group started more than 10 years ago. So already in 2023, we felt it would be good maybe to organize a call for expressions of interest in the COAR community, because of course the community has increased a lot, and maybe other people in COAR community would be interested in joining. So this was very productive process, because a lot of people came knocking on the door. I would like to participate in the controlled vocabulary. So this is always, open for the community. And also, we had some rotation. So I don't know if you see well all the names, but you can see some great bunch of people that are behind the vocabularies. So these are all the people that are creating, translating, giving their input, their expertise on what resource types we should be including in the vocabulary. So you see that it's really global. We have people from many countries. And on the one hand, we have those that are members of the working group, that would be the editorial board members. But we also have another bunch of great people, experts, that are always also available every time we need them for, translations, very specific input. So in total, we are a lot of people. And I think this is not something so common, because really we are all very, very engaged. So this is what we did with this new composition of the editorial board. We were basically going through the vocabulary last year. It was already 2 years we hadn't updated it. So it was also nice, because we had many new people bringing new languages. So now we have a vocabulary with lots of languages. You will see how many. And then, as I said, this is a transparent and community-based governance. We meet and we decide and discuss jointly what are the resource types we think should be included in the vocabulary, because there are repositories, a growing number of repositories that are using them in the infrastructure. So you know that now we are talking about all kinds of new things that go beyond publications and research data. Even those sound like old-fashioned, no? Even preprint is kind of, it's already in the system. So we included new ones. And in addition to agreeing on the new concepts, including the vocabulary, we went on to do the translations in all these languages. We also had to update all the relations with concepts in third-party vocabularies, and this is very time-consuming because you have to go and check other vocabularies, other classifications for resource types out there, and as you know, now it's a very common component in open science initiatives and projects. Of course, we also had to assign portals. This is the PID we use in the vocabulary, and we published it last December. Last thing we did in this whole work last year was also to identify different registries, open science registries, where we want to include the vocabularies to promote usage. So we started to do this with Bartok, fair sharing, linked open vocabularies. There are many different registries that are trying to put together all these vocabularies for easy identification. And of course, we also presented the new version in different venues. So this is the latest version, 3.2. We included 9 new concepts. So in total, we have 105 today. And you can see there what concepts we have agreed to include. Things like knowledge organization system, knowledge synthesis protocol, physical samples. If you are working in the realm of research data, physical samples is now something that is coming. You see this is coming to the repository, research instruments. So these are the ones that we included in this new version. And in total, we have the vocabulary now in 25 languages. This is always open to more languages, as many languages as needed. So if you think your language is not here, just come on board or send us the translations, or decide, what kind of collaboration you want to have, very intensive or just for the translations. We also made an update on the definition of learning object to make it more inclusive. This is something we still have to reflect on the publishing web that I showed before. And then we also did all these updates of linking to these concepts, related concepts in other third-party vocabularies. And this was really very time-consuming, I would say, because we went to check other quite used vocabularies like Fabio, DataSite, schema.org, Vivo. These are all vocabularies of resource types. So if you know more, please tell us, because this is something that is always changing. And this is the sneak preview of the poster we are going to present in Open Repositories. is draft, is almost final. So if you are going to be in Chicago, please come. I think it's nice because it's kind of reflecting, you know, with one look you can see all the concepts we have right now in the vocabulary. And, you know, beyond being widely used in repositories, I think many of us have integrated the COAR vocabularies into our repositories. I think they are being used in many other ways, like they are present and mentioned as good practice in national guidelines. For instance, this is the case in my country, in Spain. Is considered this is something you should be doing and integrate in your repository and also in the national aggregator and other national systems. Of course, also harvesters are integrating them. Funders are also in many countries using the vocabulary to identify the resource types that repositories have as a mechanism to monitor compliance of the policy. And also, ORCID was doing an update of its classification of resource types and is using many of the concepts of the COAR vocabulary. So it's not just to say that it's not only repositories that are making wide use of the vocabulary. As I said, we are not stopping here. We are always, you know, doing many things. Chicago is the next stop, but we are also thinking of preparing more promotional material. We have an implementation guide, a technical implementation guide, but it will be good also to update it. Because it was updated last time, I think 3 years ago. And then we also want to start concentrating on updating the other two vocabularies. You know, we have the access types vocabulary that is indicating what type of access a given resource has on the repository. And also the version types vocabulary. This one needs updating. This one is the one referring to preprints and accepted manuscripts and this version of record. And the vocabulary somehow is kind of out of date and out of sync with reality. And we would like to think of how to include the publish, review, curate workflow in this vocabulary. And also another action line we have is to collaborate with many other infrastructures that don't know us yet for them to use the vocabulary. So I'm going to pass the word to my colleague. Here you see all the languages we have. Please take a look. If your language is not here, I think we have on the pipeline also Atzeri translation of concepts. But I mean, there are always a lot of languages that could enrich. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Konnichiwa. I would like to say first thank you to Isabel because we can't manage all this issue without her amazing effort. Also, we got fully support from the COAR management, so this is just not for the COAR, this is for all around the world. Because interoperability is our basic target, so we have to work for interoperability. COAR Controlled Vocabularies Group just working for that. So, my name is Gultekin Gurdal. I am working for Izmir Institute of Technology. as a library director. I am also working for OpenAir as an executive board member. I would like to start why I am so excited to be in Japan. I would like to share with you, because my wife is working as a Japanese instructor in my institution. So I'm very familiar, Japanese life, Japanese food, Japanese culture. Also, my wife every year organizing different events in my institution. So she is cooking sushi, making origami. So I always wanted to be here. We planned 10 years ago to come together, and then we take a ticket. But our daughter was very small. She didn't allow me to come to Japan. She came here alone. She stayed 2 months for one of the education program. So always I wanted to come here. So I did. Okay. Thanks to Isabel, she explained all the issues related with these controlled vocabularies, but I would like to give you just a brief information, local level. She gave the information as a global level. What was the current situation in my country, in Turkey? Different repositories write different terms. The same terms can have different meanings. Some resources types are not tagged. This is the most challenging and difficult issues for us. What was our aim to starting this issue? By the way, Isabel, we are going to celebrate our 10th years. Yeah, we are working more than 10 years, yeah. We ensure better management of the open access content Turkey by adopting COAR's work on the Turkish. Our scope is examining the resource source types used in institutional repositories in Turkey and matching them with the COAR vocabularies. What's our goal? The open access environment in Turkey is rapidly developing. However, there is a lack of standardization in source type of labeling, standardized Turkish resource type labeling, and increased institutional compatibility. I would like to give just some information on what we did. We started to translate all the COAR content vocabularies in Turkish. We started 2015. After that, we translated the version types vocabulary 2021. Last year, we translated the version, resource type repository version 3.2. And then always we are coordinating with the COAR team. Also, what we did, we shared all the Turkish translation with the Turkish community. And then we received their feedback about translation. Also, we try to promote and increase the awareness of the COAR control vocabulary within the Turkey. So this is our workflow, how we adopt the COAR vocabulary in Turkish. Especially, we translated the old terms, and then sometimes it's not enough to the translation for yourselves. Sometimes not easy to find the right word of the translation. If you have any problem, if you get confused, we ask the practitioners. So we try to find the right words to translation. And then after that also we are shared with all the translation with the Turkish community. So sometimes very easy to work yourself, but if you need a technical help, this is really important. We translate many years ago all the controlled vocabularies terms, but we didn't implement. One of the main reasons is it's not easy to find a technical person to this job. Because of that, I opened my own company. So I have a very good technical teams, and then we adapted all the controlled vocabularies in our repository. Our repository, which is called GCRIS. GCRIS is a institutional repository and research information system. So we integrated COAR resource type, latest version 3.2 in our repository. Also, we integrated the resource type field. As you see in the screen, it's very easy. Resource type hierarchy. You are just adding your records and then choosing your resource type. In the user interface, you are seeing your selection. Also, we added the filter in this space. It's very easy to browse COAR access right category or COAR resource type category. It's very easy, just browsing your interface. As you see, if you come to this space secret, you can choose one of the resource type category from the hierarchy. If you choose one of them, system automatically getting list in this hierarchy. So it's very easy to see all the resource types together. As I mentioned before, we had some difficulties, shift meanings, synonymity, and then standardization to the word, because sometimes some words using from different people, so you have to decide which word you are going to use for translation. It's going to be your standardization. So we are contributing to COAR vocabularies, aligning national repository system with the global standards, enabling interoperability through the shared terminology. Izmir Institute of Technology as a contact point of COAR. Maybe we have 3 or more members in Turkey, but we are working as a national contact point. When I get something from COAR, always I'm translating and distributing within the country. This is also very helpful for my colleagues in Turkey because they need to know what's happening in the world. This is the right access about these issues, the COAR, because COAR is just a confederation of open access repositories. If you would like to see our integration, I am sharing with the links our ISTEC GCRIS. We implemented our demo server. It's going to be production end of June. I am sharing all the links in here. If you would like to see, you can go to this link and check. If you have any problem, just let me know. Also, we are planning to organize a webinar in Turkey, how we do that, and then we are trying to explain to the people, because only one institution not enough for interoperability, so we have to force other institutions in Turkey. We have around 200 repositories in Turkey, so we are also planning to prepare maybe short videos and then guides how they are going to implement their repository, because technical part is, if you have a good team, very easy, but if you don't have a technical team, it's not easy for the people. So we are trying to broke all the barriers, technical barriers. We are planning to help the people. So this is my words. Thank you very much. I am very happy to be here. Tomorrow I have another presentation. I will be here too. Isabel, maybe we can get some questions. Just Isabel, please. If you didn't ask any question, I'm going to ask to you.
Okay.
Everything is very clear, Isabel. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Isabel and Gultekin. And I think one of the countries that uses our vocabularies the most is actually Japan. So probably everybody here is very familiar with them. So our next speaker and last speaker of the day is Paul Walk, and he is COAR's genius technical consultant who we rely on very much for his input in many areas. And most recently, we have been working together to launch an international repository directory, which he's going to give you a little peek into. It hasn't been officially launched yet, but it will be very soon. And I think also Paul's going to explain why we decided to do this when we know there are already a number of other directories available in the ecosystem. So with that, I turn it over to you, Paul.
Right, good afternoon. The last session of the day, so I will be kind and I won't speak for too long. So before we get into this, I want to explain a couple of terms which we use in these discussions about the IRDs. So the word repository, although we use the word repository all the time, particularly in this conference, it's not necessarily a very clearly defined word, and that matters when you're deciding whether or not to include a system into a directory. So for the purposes of this discussion, we're talking about systems which collect and provide open access to papers, data, software, and other resources which are relevant to research, teaching, and learning. We also use the word network here, which is, of course, a very overloaded word with lots of meanings. But in this case, we're using it to describe organizations or communities which have taken some kind of responsibility for a set of repositories. So we're using it in a very particular way in this discussion. Some networks are national, some are international, some are not actually geopolitical particularly, but there are networks of repositories around particular software platforms, for example. But generally with the IRD, we found it works best to deal with countries and regions, the networks which fit those countries and regions. And there's some examples there, like La Referencia is probably the most sort of developed of these that I'm aware of. JPCOAR, which represents Japan, and we've heard about JPCOAR today already. OpenAir, which covers much of Europe. I put UK COAR in there because I persuaded them to take care of the UK. And then there's some of these networks overlap. So in the example of Portugal, Portugal has a national organization which represents repositories in Portugal, but it also plays a very active participation in OpenAir. So there's some overlap there. So why do we need an international directory of repositories is a reasonable place to start. So repositories are becoming increasingly regarded as a legitimate part of global infrastructure supporting open access. And if anything, that importance is definitely having a moment of growth again. There's a growing interest in repositories as being part of the solution to providing sustainable and open science. And so, in a way, repositories have, if anything, started to become more interesting despite having been well established for some time. An authoritative source of information is necessary, particularly for people like funders, infrastructure developers, providers, to get an understanding of the repository landscape. Repositories change over time, so the information about them becomes out of date, and I can show you evidence of how badly and how quickly this information does become out of date if it's not actively curated and maintained. So a managed directory is crucially important. And other infrastructure providers, such as La Referencia, OpenAir, COAR, all of whom are represented today in this meeting, They have all said that they would love to have a single authoritative source of information about just the existence and the location of repositories, and a small amount of metadata would enable their services to work and would relieve them of the burden of having to maintain this information in each system. So why do we need another directory of repositories? Well, it's worth noting that there are other directories in existence. However, we've looked at these closely. None of them are comprehensive, and all of them rely on centralized curation of the data, which is expensive and inefficient. And that generally means that it doesn't get done, or it doesn't get done in a timely way. The data quality varies considerably, and some of the existing records we've looked at in existing directories just don't appear to have ever been updated since they were initially created years ago, and are consequently incorrect and misleading and just plain wrong in lots of ways. And often the curation process itself is opaque. It's not clear what kind of service level you might expect from these directories, how the data is maintained, to get any sense of confidence in whether or not you can rely on that information. Specifically, the question's been asked a few times, why not use Open Door? So Open Door is a system which was originally developed by the University of Nottingham in the UK and subsequently taken over by JPCOAR in the UK. And it's been the sort of de facto source of this kind of information for some time. Currently it has around 6,000 records in it. However, the services which have tried to use it have found that the data is not current. I did some analysis of this, and I can tell you that, in my analysis anyway, the main URL given for each repository record in Open Door, 20% of those were incorrect. And for the OAI PMH URL, it was more like 50% were incorrect. Another significant problem with Open Door is that users have found that it takes a very long time to get a response if you make a request to have a record updated. So not only is the data out of date, but it's not easily corrected. The licensing of the data is not clear, which is a surprising thing, but it's not. And JPCOAR, which owns the service, has actually said that it wants to focus on the UK landscape and is less concerned with with repositories beyond the UK. So, the lesson that we've learned from this, the big challenge for a directory of repositories, is really the fact that a centrally managed directory is just expensive to run. It's inefficient or expensive. One or two people just can't manage this. So a repository directory needs to ensure that the data is quick and easy to add, it's quick and easy to update, and that we should try to automate this where possible to keep the costs down. Quick and easy to verify and validate the information. Again, we should try to automate some of this where we can, and that it therefore becomes a trusted source. So the solution that we're presenting and that we've developed at COAR is the distributed curation model. So in this, the IRD itself, the system is centrally hosted by COAR and managed. However, the data that's in it, the responsibility for the curation of that data is distributed to those networks that we spoke about earlier, the networks of groups who are interested in representing collections of repositories around the world. So each network of repositories will have what we call a designated responsible organization. So we identify an organization to take the responsibility for the curation of that section of the directory. So a very simple diagram to just try to get this idea across. So we have three networks represented there. each network has a designated responsible organization, and then that organization takes care of the curation of the metadata about the repositories within its area of responsibility. So this means that COAR can manage the group of responsible organizations, can manage the relationship with them, and then the responsibility for managing the data about the repositories is delegated to those organizations. The responsible organizations have a great deal of freedom in how they go about curating the data. They can use the user interface to the IRD to manage the records directly, to update them, to suggest new repositories, to indicate the repositories are now defunct, and so on. They can delegate this responsibility to people, so they can create what we call authorized users. Some of the people we've spoken to who may play the role of responsible organization have said they would rather that the individual repository managers were given an account to manage their own record. This is perfectly possible with this model. The authorized user doesn't necessarily have to be a person. We have a certain degree now of not exactly an API, but a way of automatically processing data. So we are approaching the point where the authorized user could be a trusted process rather than a person. Right now we have an approach where we export a CSV of data, and people can edit that CSV and give it back to us, and we will update the data with that. So just a couple of things about the design. So it's a web service. From the beginning, everything in it really is accessible to human users and remote software, which means that there's a basic RESTful API. Any URL you go to, you can pretty much add a suffix like JSON, and you'll get that information in a machine-readable form. So it plays very well in the machine-oriented web. Curation of some of the data about repositories is automated. Some of you would have seen me speak this morning about the friendly bot. This is the IRD system which goes out and collects very simple information about repositories, checks that the URLs are working, that kind of thing. So I think I said earlier that we have 3 criteria for inclusion in the IRD. The repository, the majority of its content must be open access. It must have a functioning web page, and it must have a functioning OAI PMH interface. Now, this is a somewhat arbitrary set of criteria, but we have to settle on something. Otherwise, we have endless arguments about what is a repository and should it be included and so on. We think these things are essential characteristics. And just a note about the data. From the beginning, because the data that we are collecting freshly ourselves, we can clearly license the data, and all of the data in IRD is licensed under a CC0 license, which means it's public domain. You can do whatever you want with it. You don't need to attribute the IRD, although attributing COAR would be gratefully received, I'm sure. And the software is also open source and made available under an MIT license, which is a permissive open source license. So the current status, we identified around about 10,000 potential repositories by looking at existing public data sets, just looking at the names and the URLs of those repositories. So we ingested just the URLs, and from there checked them and processed them and built up a picture of a true picture of those records. That meant that a lot of data had to be deduplicated because different available public data sets would have the same records about the same repositories and so on. Surprisingly, quite a few of the existing directories had multiple records about the same repository within just their directory. I think the biggest example of that I came across was 9 records that were duplicates within the one directory, plus duplicates in other directories as well. So there's quite a significant amount of deduplication has happened here. We identified some of these repositories as clearly defunct or clearly out of scope, and so we archived those straight away. And then we recorded the status and checked the OAI PMH interface and so on. So that's led to the numbers that you'll see in the yellow box there. So we have different stages of processing of the metadata records. So they start off as a draft record. That means we haven't really processed them yet. We still have 2,600 of those. We have records which are awaiting review. We have records which are currently under review with one of the responsible organizations. And then we have records which have been verified by a responsible organization. So there's a kind of a pipeline. The ones we make public are the ones which are awaiting review, the ones which are under review, and the ones which are verified. So you can see them, but you can see that they've not been verified yet if they haven't been verified yet. And if they're under review, you can see which organization is reviewing them. I will show you this in a minute. And then there was the archived records, so that's more than 800 now. We keep those so that in future we don't accidentally create a new record for a repository which we know to be defunct. So we identified 2 responsible organizations to begin with to effectively to test the system and to work with them, organizations which we knew well and could trust. So for Japan, we obviously worked with JPCOAR and colleagues at NII. And for Canada, Kathleen really personally worked with Carl, the Canadian Association of Research Libraries. Yep. That one's in progress at the moment. This has been a useful test because JPCOAR NII used the automated approach by taking a large CSV of data and processing it and then giving me the data back, which worked really well. Whereas Carl are using the more kind of human-mediated approach using the web interface. So this is great. So we're testing 2 of the approaches. So the next steps are, we need to do quite a bit more testing, but we can do that. We need to identify and enable more responsible organizations to start taking responsibility for reviewing subsets of the records. We're always running automated checks on the draft records. I say always, we're periodically doing this. And as we have run multiple tests, if we've got multiple failures, if a repository has just been offline for quite a long period of time and has been checked many times, then we can consider it defunct. But we're very careful not to just consider a record defunct simply because the repository didn't respond the one time we checked it. We're aware that repositories, have problems, the networks have problems, and so on. So we're very careful about that. But if a record consistently fails the tests over and goes beyond a certain threshold of numbers of times and duration, then we archive it. Again, if it turns out that it's just been offline for a very long time and for some reason manages to be resurrected, then we can take it back out of the archive. That's still there, the record is still there. If the record passes the test, so we can say, we don't know very much about this repository, but we know that at least it's online and it has an OAI PMH interface, then we allocate it to the appropriate responsible organization, and then they review it. Okay, I'm now going to do something very foolish. which is to demonstrate a very new system to a room full of people. Let's see how this works out. Okay, I've hidden the URL because I don't want all of you going there at the same time while I'm demonstrating and have it fall over before I've even begun. I will give you the URL at the end, okay? Right, so this is the home page. We could probably do some more with this, but I've just quickly put some basic statistics on there. So you can see the number of records that we have in the system there and those different public statuses. Remember that there are also some records which are archived, and there are also some records which are draft records which are not shown here. So there's an about page which explains some of how this works, some of what I've showed you already. It has some acknowledgements there, and this will start to list the responsible organizations. So far we have JPCOAR, we have CARL for Canada. Some repositories just don't belong to a particular network. We consider them to be perhaps sort of global in scope. So the default responsible organization for those right now is COAR. So we will take care of those at COAR. So the main interface is, the main part of this is the repository browser. So, sorry, I'm struggling to see this. It's very small, so that's why I'm hesitating. So this is a faceted search interface. So it allows us to do, for example, just a simple, straightforward search here. So I could search for Zenodo, which I know is in here, and I get some search results, and then this gives me the record for Zenodo. But also I can use the faceted browsing on the left, so I have a number of different facets or criteria for searching. There's the record status, which won't be interesting for most public users. But then we start to get into some more useful classifications. Repository scope. So we've defined a number of basic types of repository here. There's been some discussion recently about changing this list slightly. Some fierce arguments about is data repository a scope, for example, or there are actually quite a few repositories in there which are more like kind of special collections, but they appear to be valuable. You know, they may be interesting to differentiate those. Some of those terms are somewhat loose terms. I mean, institutional repositories, not always clear. There are departmental repositories and so on. But we don't want to overcomplicate it. So that's the sort of discussions that we've been having. We have primary subject. And we have, so there was also a discussion about whether we should have multiple subjects. That just becomes, all of these decisions are careful judgments about the amount of work needed to curate the data. And primary subject seems actually a better approach because many repositories will be multidisciplinary, so we just pick multidisciplinary, that's fine. But sometimes you have a repository which is very particularly a domain-specific repository, so that's also possible. The media types are, and I'd like to give a shout out to the core vocabularies which we saw presented just now. So these terms are taken from the core vocabulary, and in fact in the database they use the identifiers. So in the machine readable versions of this you can use the effectively the semantic identifiers from the core vocabulary. Then we have some geographical information, continent, country. The software platform, we are able to detect the software platform quite reliably for many platforms, but not all. So that information can also be curated by the responsible organizations. The metadata formats which are offered by OAI PMH, that's something we can also automatically gather from the OAI PMH interface. So each of these can just be selected. So if I wanted to see which repositories in Japan, did that work? Let me do it again. There we go. So I have 550 repositories showing, and I want to find repositories in Japan which which have as their primary subject health and medicine. So that's filtered it down to 52 records. And then I might only be interested in the ones running on Waco, so that gives me 49. So it's that kind of approach to search. At any point, I can get the search results in a machine-readable form. I'll show you this by clicking the button, but you can actually just form the URL. So if I click on JSON, then that's the same search results that we just saw, but in a machine-readable format. And likewise with CSV. So we'll look at one particular, before we do, I just want to show the language translations. So this interface has been internationalized or localized into a variety of languages. Now, for some time, I was concerned that this would be a very time-consuming and expensive process to provide translations for hundreds of labels and menu items and so on. We've actually done it using, I'm sorry to say, Google, and I'm told that the results are good enough, which means that we need to make a judgment about whether it's worth the time and the effort to do any more than that. I've become something of more of an expert in these kinds of processes for translation. So if you're interested, I'm happy to talk about it. But it's so if I select Japanese, for example, here, then pretty much everything you can see should be in Japanese now, apart from the proper names, you know, like the platform names or the metadata names. And there are, currently we have Spanish, French, Portuguese, Turkish, and Chinese. Anyway, I'll go back to English because being an Englishman, it's the only language I speak properly. So we can look at just one record in a little bit more detail. So I found one earlier that was quite a nice example. So the Aichi University repository. So you'll see that this record we have, it's linked to the owner. In the vast majority of cases, we've been able to identify a raw identifier for the owner. So this links to the we have the entire raw database in here, actually. We just simply import the latest version of raw, and they're now updating their data very frequently. It's a good service. So this is giving us some really good consistency about being able to link repositories to organizations. And the same for the responsible organizations. We have raw identifiers for most of those. We can see that it's in Japan. There's a description. We can see the software is Waco. We have the OAI PMH identifier. Now, because we know that this record exists in OpenDoor, because we can compare generally we're comparing the main URL, but also in some cases, some other pieces of metadata, we can confidently say this is in OpenDoor and it has this identifier, and you can link back to OpenDoor if you want to go there for some reason. And we have that relationship established for 3 or 4 directories. So there's re3 data, which is a directory of data repositories. Lyrasis, which has a big collection of primarily DSpace repositories. We also link to them. I think there was one more, but I've forgotten what it was. No. Then we have media types, metadata formats, as I said earlier. We have a nice picture because why not? We have the system status, so you know that this has been checked fairly recently and that it's online and the OER PMH is working. Excuse me. You can link to the responsible organization. If there were any authorized curators, then their names would be listed here. This is the admin interface, so there's a bit of extra information which you won't see with the public interface, like it has some curation issues and then a whole lot of operations which you can do as an admin or as a responsible organization. But hopefully that gives you the general idea. There's a lot more we could do with this. We've started looking at statistics. We can do some visualizations, this kind of thing, do some graphs by software platform, OAI PMH status for platforms with 10 or more repositories, that sort of thing may be useful to people. And I think I'm going to stop there and ask for questions. Thank you. And I promised I would give you the URL once I'd got safely through the demonstration, so there you go. I can't see any questions at all.
No, thank you, Paul. Very interesting. So I just have a generic question. So, is it possible? So you mentioned that profiles of repositories have an owner. Okay, is it possible to push for changes that then have to be approved by the owner? So I was thinking of scenarios, for example, in OpenAir, we should collaborate on this because we have done the deduplication process, but across different registries. So that's interesting, right? So you have one registry we're not considering, and vice versa, okay? So if, for example, we would like to send you the duplicates that we found, so the interlink in between, is there any way, because you have the owners there, right? So that's the added value. So is there any way to push these notifications to the owner and ask them to validate the data that we send? Several other things we could do the same, right? So we could send you percentages of bibliotypes, percentages of data versus publications and software. So countings that could be helpful to the profile enrichment, let's say.
So I didn't quite know what you meant by owner.
The owner, you mentioned before that is one contact or multiple contacts delegated by the contact to validate a profile. So to make sure that the profile tells the truth, okay? So if I want to push something in it and say, okay, look, you do that as a repository, right? Is there a process for the owner to acquire this information, to confirm it and validate it?
Yes, so the model is that the simplest model is that the responsible organization has one person in that responsible organization, and they actually curate the data themselves. That's the simplest model. A more complex model is that responsible organization has several people or processes which it delegates that responsibility to. And then the third more complex model is where the responsible organization delegates the responsibility for a particular repository to somebody else, to typically the repository owner, but not necessarily. It's basically anybody they want that has an email address, because we use email addresses to authenticate to the system.
Maybe it wasn't clear. If it's me, that I'm not the owner, I'm a service out there. Could be OpenAir, could be COAR UK, could be, we have information about profiles, repositories on our sites, which are misaligned with yours, and we would like to push them to your system. is there any way for these owners we're talking about through this delegation to acquire this information and bring it into the profiles on your site?
If the responsible owner delegates the curation to somebody who wants to use that process, then yes. Yeah. The whole point of this distributed curation model is that we are delegating the curation of the metadata. Those decisions are being delegated to the responsible owner, the responsible organizations, and they in turn can empower people to use whatever method they want to update the data. But this is about the distribution of responsibility. It's not so much about the distribution of the methods. That's slightly, in some senses, it's something we're not going to concern ourselves with too much, because if you try to take direct control of all of that, you're back to the problem that Open Door and these people have, which is that there isn't enough effort and time available to manage it. So the answer to your question is yes, but it would be up to the responsible organization.
Yeah, I was asking if it was possible through the system. So if there is anything that you're thinking of as a user interface or an API for others to push information that is not valid, I'm not even authorized to fill in a profile, right? And this information is fed to those who are in charge. So if you're thinking of such a system, which doesn't conflict at all with the distributed idea you have, it's just a way to acquire information rather than from manual curation of users, also through systems. And this information then is curated in a second stage. That was the...
Yes, so NII have provided us with data which they have to some degree generated from their information. That's what we have used to update this. But we delegated that responsibility to them. I should say that some of the information is very difficult, if not impossible, to derive through any automated means, because it's, for example, the subject classifications and so on. It's possible that someone might have done some work out there to classify a repository's contents with some process, in which case we could accept that, but it's delegated. Kathleen?
Yeah, maybe I just would like to add, I mean, the whole idea behind this is that organizations that are close to the repository community are those responsible organizations. So one would assume that the responsible organization has a better understanding of the repositories in their community than you would at OpenAir or another large aggregator. So this is what we're hoping happens with the system, is that these repositories are well curated, taken care of by a central organization that has a strong interest in making sure that those repository records are up to date.
Right.
Wait, you need to take the microphone.
Thanks a lot. Maybe a follow-up question. Is there a plan to have an API that would connect this international repository directory to OpenAir, or maybe national CRIS system? Because I would imagine a use case when Ukrainian national CRIS system would like to fetch information about 300 repositories from international repository directory. Yeah. And maybe using CSV won't be the best way.
Yeah, it's already there. They simply form the URL that has all of the search terms and put .json at the end, and it does what I showed. That's already there. Or CSV. We found with the CSV though, it works better if you we've configured it so the CSV is a download, where the JSON is paginated results. So it's a slightly different approach, but both of those can work with a process like you described.
Yeah.
Hi.
I don't know if you said, I mean, you were referring about the whole procedure to start contacting potential responsible But you didn't say when or how it's going to be this pipeline.
I'm going to refer you to my friend Kathleen Shearer for that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting process to curate the records, for example, of the Canadian, close to 200 records. It is taking more time than we anticipated, and there are also questions coming from the curators to Paul and I. So I think what we'd like to do is set up a kind of onboarding roadmap for different countries. And we will officially launch the pilot of the IRD at Open Repositories. We've already had some countries that have expressed interest and would, have put their hand up. So I think I need to consider how to manage that process, and I hope by June, when we do the pilot launch, I'll be able to have a more concrete idea of how we start to onboard different countries.
Thank you very much for your great effort. It's looking very nice. It was our dream. Maybe 10 years ago, we dreamed this one. Our dreams come true. I checked the website. Not reviewed. Who is going to review?
Who's going to use it?
Yeah.
That's a good question. We did some work at the beginning trying to identify what we called user stories. And I think that primarily, I think the users are going to be service providers, infrastructure providers, funders, those kinds of organizations, rather than, for example, researchers. I don't really see this as a researcher-facing system. It's more for people who are in research support roles or research enabling roles, that kind of thing.
Okay. Maybe, Kathleen, one of the other issues, we can find the contact points in countries. The awareness also, because I've seen many duplicate records, that links, so we have to be make clear for everything. Yeah, it's really important initiative. Yeah, okay.
Can I sit down now? Oh no.
I'll just add, Paul, respectfully, I think you're wrong about the researchers, because we've been writing grants a lot lately, and every time we have this little disagreement of like, how many repositories are there in the US or North America? And then we try to calculate, and then every time we go back, Kathleen says, oh, let's look up in the IRD, and then calculate, and then add in the extra like 17 federal repositories in the US, and then make that calculation plus Canada plus. So yeah, so a couple of us, I think, are trying to figure it out, the maths in our head. Is that how we say it in the UK? The maths in our head. And maybe there's a few people, but thank you for doing this. This is amazing. It's really amazing to look at and to be able to drill down all the facets from a librarian point of view. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last orders. Okay. Right, I think we're done. Thank you.
Well, thanks again, Paul, for this really great work that you've done. And Gultekin's not kidding that this has been in the works for like 10 years at COAR, so it's really gratifying to see it alive. So I think I'll turn the mic over to June to close the conference for the day. And thank you very much, everyone.
You can do that. I just have information.
This is okay, you go ahead.
No. Okay.
I don't have my glasses on. So
yeah, please bring it back. Okay. Okay. 皆さん、今日のセッション、お楽しみいただけたでしょうか。はい。いくつか連絡事項とお願いがあります。 一つはレシーバーの返却です。毎日ですね、お使いになったレシーバーとイヤホンについては、会場を出てすぐ、そこにある箱に、返していただければと思います。数が揃わないと私が帰れないので、ご協力をお願いします。それから明日についてです。明日はですね、会場は、8時半にオープンします。この会場8時半から入れます。で、一番最初のセッションは9時に開始いたします。予定通り9時開始です。で、明日の東京の天候ですが、晴れで26度、それから、華氏でいうと79度ですけども、今日よりも暑いという天候予想されております。傘の必要はないということです。はい、私から事務連絡は以上ですけども、キャサリン。It's your turn to close the session. No, yeah. Here.
I don't have much more to say. Thank you all for coming today, and we'll see you tomorrow, bright and early. We start at 9 a.m.
Yep.
So we will have a really interesting day tomorrow because we're going to hear from about 12, 13, 14 countries or something. What are their top main trends in open science? So there will be very short presentations about what's happened in the last year or 18 months in each of those countries. So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are as well, and we'll see you tomorrow.